There's a word for you, Sydney.
Magical.
Gracious.
Trailblazer.
Persuasive.
Great.
Best.
Wise. Modest.
Mentor.
Brilliant.
What a man.
Mensch.
Sir Sidney Samuelson, for services to the British film industry.
Destiny is another word that comes to mind when I think of Sir Sidney Samuelson. Over the last half-century, Sidney has shaped the destiny of the British film and television industry. And the number of individual lives that he's changed are tantamount to the number of stars in the firmament, or thereabouts. Born in 1925, Sidney was created with film in his DNA. Sidney's dad, G.B. Samuelson, was an acclaimed silent film producer, and his mum, Marjorie Statler, a steamy silent film actress. By 14, Sidney was learning the ropes as a rewind boy at the Luxor Cinema in Lansing. And of course, it was at a film screening of Pride and Prejudice on his 21st birthday that he met his future wife, Doris.
We had a projector and we started showing the film, and would you believe it broke down? And Bernard said, "Don't worry, my friend Sammy is in the film business. He'll fix it." And he did.
Dear, beautiful, is he?
I was 18, he was just 21. That's how we met over a film show.
I think that he bought the first camera the year I was born. And then for about the next 4 or 5 years, ran the business from our house. And it was literally it was floor to ceiling with camera cases, and you climbed over them to get into your bed. I knew no different. I assumed everyone had to complete this sort of mountaineering course to get to bed at night, and certainly Peter and I did.
There were the occasions when he had to go off, and he'd been given a film. He was a cameraman, so he went off to do that, and I was left then completely on my own to run the business. I think I made a fairly good job of it.
As a cameraman and director, Sidney travelled the world. Working for the Colonial Film Commission in Africa was one incredible adventure after another. In 1953, Sidney and his brother David were part of the elite team hired to film the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. But it almost became a treasonable offence when one of the cameras broke down just minutes before Queen Elizabeth was about to be crowned. A lightning speed camera repair by Sidney saved everyone's tuchus and captured the crowning moment for posterity. Sidney's career flourished, and a Samuelson's rental empire would emerge.
I remember being very little and being at Cricklewood and driving a crab dolly over my foot and realising quite how heavy they were.
When commercial television first started, you had to have your own equipment if you were going to be in business. You had to have your own studios, you had to have your own cameras, you had to have your own sound equipment, because there was no independent facility service from which you could rent it. The existence of Samuelson's liberated companies like mine and the whole sector from the tyranny of the studio system. Over the 40 years of our existence, we made literally thousands of commercials. All I had to do was to pick up the telephone to Samuelson's, and excellence would be delivered on demand.
Providing excellence on demand wasn't limited to the emerging TV industry.
We're starting pre-production on Bond 23 at Pinewood. Sir Sidney met my father in the 50s and through the 60s when he started the Bond franchise, and since Michael and I have taken over. And for 50 years, Sir Sidney has been a support to the Bond films. With equipment and with generosity to us personally as friends. and also to the Bond film series.
Sidney was also a secret agent, but for student filmmakers, without a multi-million-pound budget.
I approached Sammy's and proposed a great deal to them, which is that I could take their equipment and pay them absolutely nothing, you see. And they were actually very willing to help, but on certain very precise conditions, which were that if we were there at 6 o'clock in the evening, we could pick up the cameras that we needed, and we had to deliver them back by 6 a.m. the following morning.
Mike? Mike! Read what Mark, young. Communist Sidney. He's tried to kill himself.
We ended up shooting this little student film very close to where Sidney had his empire. It was a deal that worked, and we actually got our film made. We had the young and newly arrived in Britain Nigel Hawthorne.
Ian Smith's student film helped to launch a producer's career, which more recently has included films such as Children of Men.
Stop! Cease fire! Cease firing!
I'm sure the list of young filmmakers who owe their start to Sidney's generosity is a long one.
Probably enough people to fill the Leicester Square Odeon.
Having been a camera person, Sidney loved to help cinematographers, often giving them kit beyond their budgets and offering them the latest toys.
Who the devil are you?
My name is Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi.
Prior to going to India with Richard Attenborough to shoot Gandhi, Sidney invited us to Samuelson's, and on the roof he demonstrated the latest piece of equipment in the form of the Lumar crane. We were very privileged to be the first production to use that equipment. There's a scene when Ben Kingsley arrives at the presidential palace, and as this foot comes into frame, the camera cranes up and cranes back to see this little man walking up this vast flight of steps. Now that could only have been done with the Lumar crane.
Gandhi went on to win 5 BAFTAs and 9 Academy Awards. Billy Williams received one of them for his cinematography. Believe it or not, Sidney's first application to join BAFTA was rejected. I'd love to see that rejection slip. What was he, too tall, too handsome, too charming, too steeped in film? But of course he didn't give up, and he eventually charmed his way into a position of trust and leadership. And he was there to help build the new headquarters. A building on Piccadilly had sex appeal, but it would cost an arm and a leg to renovate and equip. An initial donation from the Queen got the ball rolling.
And the great struggle became then to find the rest of the money. But somehow we did. Sidney had a great talent for persuading, cajoling the whole of the film industry into helping with facilities of all sorts, and indeed with money, to turn BAFTA into the technically best equipped showpiece in London.
In 1976, Sidney and Peter Morley co-produced one of the most legendary events in BAFTA history, the gala opening of the new BAFTA headquarters at 195 Piccadilly.
We had a big surprise up our sleeves, and this was totally secret. Nobody knew about it, except the Queen. She knew about it.
This man is undoubtedly the greatest figure that the world of cinema has ever known.
On cue, the doors opened, and one of our colleagues wheeled in, Charlie Chaplin. Those of us who lived through that will never forget.
Like a marriage made in heaven, Sidney's relationship with BAFTA has endured in sickness and in health.
If you're going to have a financial crisis, the best person to have around is someone like Sidney.
You can rely on Sidney for one of those quiet remarks from the back that cuts through all the bullshit.
Sidney's fundraising schemes for BAFTA are legendary, and his philanthropic streak a mile wide. As a past president of the Cinema and Television Benevolent Fund, Sidney produced even more trailblazing fundraising events.
Sidney, during his time as president of the fund, was instrumental in doing some of the most fantastic fundraising events.
Sidney conceived and produced the inspirational film harmonic. The world's greatest film score composers performed their music live. Sir Sidney is also a past president of the British Cinema and Television Veterans.
He's been with us now for 36 years. He turns up at virtually every committee meeting, and we value his very wise counsel.
Oh, and in 1982, at the age of 57, Sidney raised more money for the Benevolent Fund, running in the London Marathon, than any of the 13,000 runners who finished ahead of him. News of what a great wheeler-dealer Sir Sidney was must have reached the delicate ear of Margaret Thatcher, because in 1991 she asked him to take on the mission of being the UK's first National Film Commissioner. Mission Impossible, Saving Private Ryan and Star Wars were only some of the many blockbusters lured to the UK.
I think the toughest thing for me in becoming the second British Film Commissioner was having to do something that very, very few people have had to do, which is to follow in Sidney's shoes. I feel a little like a lounge singer coming on after Frank Sinatra, to be honest. Despite the fact it was a government agency, it had to be fleet of foot. It had to be able to interact with filmmakers in a real sense, and Sidney knew that too. Today, when you look around the UK production scene, we have international production at over £1 billion a year, which would have been unheard of in the 1990s.
Once upon a time, this building in Watford contained an assembly line for Rolls-Royce. For Star Wars, it housed 600 carpenters building props for intergalactic warfare.
The studios are full, there are thousands of people working in production, and to my mind, that's Sidney's greatest legacy. He created the agency, which created the environment to allow all of those things to happen. The job is about getting people to trust you when you tell them it's okay to spend $100 million or more in their country and nothing will go wrong. And I think everybody believed him a lot more than they believed me.
It's an impossible task being Sir Sidney's son. He's the most honourable. He built one of the biggest businesses. He's the most charitable. He's the most pro-social. He's the most gregarious. He sits on more committees than any other human in Western civilization. And he does everything excellently. And everyone loves him. I think the whole thing is totally unfair. And frankly, I don't follow in his footsteps. I try to swim in his shoes.
You meet people in the industry and they hear your surname and it turns out you're Sidney's son, and then the next thing is he gave me my first break, he helped us with free equipment, he got us started, and that for me I think is the best thing of all.
The film industry, it's his life's blood. He loves it. He lives for it. And even though he's supposed to be retired, but of course that will never happen.
Sir Sidney, it's not just what you've done that we adore. We actually adore you. So let's drink to you. Don't ever retire.